Lucy, Part 5. The week had begun as it carried on. It was fantastic. Every day at school went swimmingly by. There wasn't anything that really upset her that week. There were kids that were made to stand outside the door when they were naughty, and she couldn't help but smile at them as she felt a little bit of pity. What could they have done that was that bad? Lucy thought to herself. Thrown a ball of paper across the room? Pinged someone with a ruler? Oh, if only they knew what life would hand them as they got older. College, university, and then work. If only they knew this was the best time of their lives, she thought. But as we all know, not every child thinks that their schooling is the best part of their life, and Lucy knew that too. She got on amazingly with everyone at the school. They were all really kind, generous and caring people. Obviously there was one or two that she didn't think she would gel with as well as she did with the others, and Steph, or Stephanie, was absolutely wonderful. They had become good mates in that first week. They'd spent ages in their dinner hour and also their lunch breaks, and even walking around the schoolyard together, talking about their lives in the past and what they hoped for in the future. Lucy obviously knew that Steph was going to be an ongoing friend, and there was no doubt about that. At last Friday night came round, quiz night in the local pub. They both turned up quite early to get a seat. Even though they had set tables for the little groups that were doing the quiz, they needed seats to sit to watch the fun. The groups were really fantastic. Each one of them came from one of the local shops. There was the butcher, his wife, and two of the workers from the shop. There were some other people that came as well. There was a whole collection of little shops in the village down the road, and many of them came. The questions weren't really hard, but some of them that were harder, it seemed, for the people, were the ones that were asked about foreign lands and what was going on in policies and politics. They all looked at each other and sighed as these questions were asked, because many of them just weren't interested. They had their everyday life to cope with, their families, their health, their jobs. And some of the questions were so easy that some of the people that were watching giggled and said, "Who wouldn't get that? Even I know the answer to that." Lucy and Stephanie giggled between each other, pointing at people, laughing, saying things out loud so the people laughed as well. There was no animosity between anybody until the final question was asked. The local butcher shop won the prize. They were just pipped at the post. They said, "That's not fair," said the people that worked in the local post office. "Pipped at the post? You cheated us!" "No, we never did," said Tom, who worked at the local butcher's. The post office team were really cheesed off. They were well sure that they had been cheated on the last question. "Jason said it first." "No, he didn't," said Tom. But anyway, someone stepped forward and calmed it all. "You were pipped at the post by the local butcher's shop." There was lots of sighing and a few rumbles in the background, but eventually it was sorted. People were now laughing and chatting and getting on. Most of the people there looked really relaxed, just in jeans, tops, jumpers. It was that kind of an evening when everybody could just tie their hair back and chill. You didn't have to worry about anybody looking at you, no makeup. It was just a fun, easygoing kind of evening in a small, local, traditional pub setting. There was food cooking out the back, and Lucy felt sure she could smell hot pot. If it was on the menu, she was going to have some, as she hadn't had any for weeks. She loved hot pot. It was one of the things that they tended to make in the house where she lived with the other girls. The reason being it was cheap, and sometimes they could make enough that it could last 2 or 3 days, and that was fantastic. She even liked it cold, after a night out drinking and come home hungry, and there it sat in the fridge, and she would eat it with a chunk of bread. At last someone stood up and said what the prize would be. The prize for this week's quiz is a hamper from the local store. And that was well received. It had things in it like biscuits, cheese, there was even some eggs, a whole collection of groceries and bits and pieces, and some treats, cake, shortbread fingers and that kind of thing, and a couple of bars of chocolate that Lucy looked at and thought, do I? Don't even think about having chocolate. She was trying hard now to keep herself healthy and fit. If she had to run around after primary school children, she needed to keep it together, was what she thought to herself. That night again she met several people that she had never seen before, and up at the bar stood a young man. She hadn't seen him. He didn't seem to be talking to anyone, and she asked Steph who he was. "Oh, that's Paul," she said. "Been living here forever." "Oh," she said, "that's Mrs. P's grandson. I never thought to tell you," she said. Lucy looked at him admiringly. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit, shirt and tie. "He normally comes in from work," says Stephanie. "He works in one of the big towns and then travels back at the weekend, goes and visits his gran, and spends time at a small cottage that he bought down the road." "Oh," said Lucy, looking at him and not really knowing what to say. Something about him that felt so familiar, she thought to herself, as if she'd known him for years, but obviously she hadn't, but he just gave off that aura, and she could feel it. And her belly turned. It was almost as if she knew him or of him. Something would happen, but she wasn't sure what. Anyway, as we all know, those feelings of meeting someone for the first time can sometimes make you feel a bit tingly. Not love, but something special, like a spark. He turned around and she could see that he was looking at the pair of them. Stephanie waved her fingers at him and he put his hand up and smiled. A warm, caring smile and lovely, sparkly blue eyes. He had blonde hair, which she admired because it wasn't cut too short. It was just at that length where it looked tousled but not untidy. Clean shaven, smart, clothes looked well ironed. "I bet he still gets his mum to iron his clothes," Lucy said to Stephanie, and Stephanie giggled into her half a pint of lager. "You're probably right," she said. "He's always been well looked after by the women in his family. He's got 3 sisters as well, and they spoil him rotten. He's the youngest." "Oh, I see," said Lucy. "A man that's well cared for. If he's got that many women around him, he should know about femininity, and he should know how girls like to be treated." She actually said this out loud, not realising she had, and giggled uncontrollably, and Steph and her bumped shoulders and laughed. That evening, as she slowly walked home, she thought about the evening and the laughs she had had and the times they had had. It'd been really funny, she thought to herself. My first real evening out in my village. Fantastic. Steph had gone off in the opposite direction and she walked back to the cottage. She was quite happy to be home. She had left the Reborn burning, so it was nice and warm when she got in. She hadn't seen the cat. Phyllis hadn't turned up, and she wasn't worried because she knew she was out mousing or doing what cats do. The next day, she knew that she wanted to get on a bit more with the garden. She had decided that first things first, there was a couple of sheds that really did needed sorting out. Sure, Mrs. P had left her some fantastic gardening implements, but half of them she couldn't get to because everything was stacked on top. Cardboard boxes, wooden boxes, sacks of stuff. She needed to sort it out, and that would be her weekend job. She'd get on it as soon as was possible. So that was how her first Friday night with her friends had gone. Thoroughly enjoyable. And she knew that sooner or later she'd know everybody in the town, and they could all have a laugh, and they could all perhaps get together at the local dance, which apparently happened 2 or 3 times a year. She hoped for it, but would it happen? We don't know. But we'll see, won't we? We'll find out maybe in the next episode of Lucy, which will be part 6. Anyway, I want you all to take care. I love you all dearly. Lots of kisses. Mwah, 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 from Grandma Kimmy. Take care, my sweeties. Take care, my besties. Bye for now.